My name is Gisle Løkken, and I'm a founder of the architect office 70 Degrees North Architecture. Living in northern Norway has always been determined by the landscape conditions and also the shifting weather conditions or climate. And what we try to do when we plan a project, and especially kindergartens, projects for children, is to create a relation between the inside of the building and also the bigger landscape outside the building. So that you always tend to be in contact with the bigger landscape, which is extremely important for the notion of being in Tromsø. Buildings in Norway, in general, they have a high standard, technical standard. And I think also the latest years there have been a much higher consciousness about the sustainable aspect about building. The kindergartens are about 15 years old, and at that time we were most occupied by creating a good atmosphere indoor. Catching the sun when it comes from the south, its main facade is from the south. Is facing the south, and that means that we have the possibility of a passive heating of the building when the sun conditions is good. It's also a division in the building between the warm zones and the more cool zones, which means also you don't have to heat the building all the time, and you don't need to have the same temperature within the building in winter time. That is also an important thing. It's a huge space to heat up, and when you can have different zones of temperature, then it is definitely a way to save energy. Maybe Norway is a little bit special in a world context because basically, in Norway there is a notion that kids should be outdoor. It's the best for kids to be outdoor, which means that they should be as much outdoor as possible for playing, for education, and also sleeping for the youngest kids when they sleep during daytime. It means that we need different spaces for different activities, also in shifting weather conditions. For instance, there are totally outdoor landscape where they can be exposed for wind and for sun and for everything that is coming from above. And there's also covered spaces where the smaller kids can be when it's heavy rain or heavy snow weather, more protected spaces. And also, of course, spaces where kids can sleep in their trolleys when the need is there. It's very much many restrictions. There's a lot of laws regulating how play space can be, how tools can be shaped, and so on. But what we think is that kids, they expose their creativity, they develop their creativity the best way if they can develop their own spaces and develop their own tools for playing. So, which means that we'd like it to be customized. So in this kindergarten we have tried to do this in the interior spaces to develop room in room, different sizes of spaces and rooms, which challenge the kids to make their own interpretations of how they want to play and how they want to take these different rooms into use. So for instance, in this kindergarten we have developed this rotating wall concept, dividing the main space in different ways. It's numerous ways you can divide it. So the kids, they can create small spaces and go where you can enter only by rabbit holes, which is not accessible for grown-ups, which means also that the kids can sort of use their own fantasy define what kind of room this should be and for what kind of activity they want to express in these spaces. So that is extremely important because it has a lot to do with this way of thinking landscape. Landscape is not defined, it's open, and you have to sort of create your own interpretation of being in a landscape. So if you can think about it a little bit the same way, that we want to get this notion of landscape also inside the building and also through the different layers or different zones in the building. So I think that is the main intentions with the kindergartens there, because as a start, the program for the kindergarten is quite defined through the program we got from the municipality of Tromsø. But within this framework, we try to develop a lot of possibilities. It's always about possibilities, not being predefined, but giving the kids possibilities to develop their own fantasy and their own creativity. So, which means also you can see there are small spaces where they can sort of hide, where it's not so exposed for other kids, and there are bigger spaces where you can get interaction between different kids. And these walls I was talking about, they can be shifted and rotated, but they are also integrated play elements. Again, it's not predefined, but it's intentionally it's an open approach to give the kids the possibility of developing their own way of using it. In the early 2000s, the Norwegian government decided to build a lot of new kindergartens to provide an alternative for all kids in Norway, which meant that the municipality had to develop their own program for new kindergartens. Altogether in Tromsø, which is a rather small city, about 70,000 inhabitants, within a few years it was built about 20 or more kindergartens within this program. So this kindergarten here is a result of that program. When the municipality of Tromsø developed the program especially for this occasion, they defined both a pedagogical program, also a spatial program for how they wanted this kindergarten to be developed. So when we got this assignment through a competition, it was our task to try to sort of interpret the program and make the best out of what we could achieve out of that program. So that means that as an architect, then you have to decide how do you want to distribute the different programs within the total programs, which means that you can partly decide if some spaces should be bigger than other spaces and so on. So within the defined program from the municipality and also the quite restricted budget, we pushed the height of the building a little bit, and then we managed to put in also a mezzanine, which I think it became quite popular for the kids, because that's also a space that can only be accessed for the kids. It's not so we think it's important for the kids to sort of get this feeling of having their own spaces where the grown-up cannot access so easily. So it's also stimulate the playing much more when they can be on their own. It's stimulating to be on their own, to develop their own role play and so on. Living in Norway, and especially in northern Norway, has always been determined by the landscape conditions and also by the shifting climate. So I think this is something that you can't be ignorant about when you're living here. What we try to do then when we create spaces for buildings for kids, especially young kids, is to sort of trying to get the interrelation between the exterior big landscape and the interior smaller landscape, and try to make it, of course it's not the same, it's a kind of interpretation, but also try to transmit some of this spatial feeling from the outside into the interiors. It's also important to create transparency between the interior and the exterior, so that you can both feel the sun when the sun is coming. It's not always there is sun. It's not like in southern Europe where the sun is a problem or it's present all the time. So when the sun is coming in the northern Norwegian context, we are celebrating the sun, and people want to be in the sun and feel the heat from the sun. So that is also something that you can experience inside the building. Parts of the building is created more like a winter garden, which means that it's not heated all the time. It's partly heated. And when the sun comes, it helps making quite livable conditions in these parts of the building. So it means also that you can feel the shifting temperature, the shifting climate in the interior as well. Because when the sun is there, it's getting warmer, of course, and when the sun disappears away, then it's getting cooler again. So this sensation of the climate also in the interior, we think is quite important.